down, dirty jokes, watch me.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am part of Powerfly's virtual hosting team, and we are so excited to have you join us for today's event. Now, before we dive into questions and introduce you to the speaker, I just want to go over some real quick housekeeping items, important in case maybe this is your first Power to Fly event, in which case, welcome. We're so happy to meet you. Or maybe you've been on a couple events with us, but it's been a while. So one big thing that you should know during today's events is that all of our events are about you. They're about our community members and making sure that we bring you informational, interactive content. So if you want to participate in today's session, you can do that in a couple different ways. You are more than welcome, if you would like to turn your cameras on, share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely today. No pressure. You do not need to be Instagram perfect. It does not matter if you are coming to us from a corner office or from your living room couch. We pride ourselves on being there for you at every stage of your career, and that really goes double, triple, quadruple for the ways that we all show up for work. So please feel free to join us if you would like. No pressure though. Now, if you have any kind of privacy concerns or anything, as long as you don't come off mute during today's session, you will not show up on the live stream or the recording of today's chat. So hopefully that'll allay any privacy concerns there. Now, if you do want to participate with or without your camera, you can still do that. You can always add any questions comments for the speaker into the group chat in Zoom. You are also welcome to DM me if you have any questions that you would like to raise, but you want to be kept anonymous. No worries, happy to do that for you. Now, like I said, today's session is being recorded. Now, what that means for you is that you get to kick back and relax. You don't have to take notes. You don't have to worry if you miss a reference that someone makes or a link that they share. You get the chance to really relax and take in today's information. Now, let's say that Jheanell shares something today that is absolutely mind-blowing. You cannot wait to share it with a friend or a coworker or a relative. What's going to happen is in about 1 to 2 business days, so probably early next week, Power to Fly is going to send everybody that registered for today's session an email, and that's going to have a link to where you can rewatch this recording when we post it on our website. Now, if you don't want to wait the 1 to 2 business days, you don't have to. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll share the links for all of this with you in the chat here in just a little bit. But you can head over to our YouTube channel. It's Power to Fly Chat and Learns. And we would love to see you there. The recording is usually posted within about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of the live stream. So you can always head over there. There's a huge section of our recorded our library of recorded chats there, so you can search and get even more access to free resources. But I obviously recommend that you check out the link on Power to Fly, if only because our entire archive library of recorded chats, everything that has happened since the beginning of Chat and Learns is there. So really awesome resources right at your fingertips. Now, I did say we are on YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel. We actually have 2, one for this, these kinds of events, and another that's our main. So if you do want to follow us, we are at Power to Fly on various social media channels, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, as we're going today, anything that we can do to, kind of expand the reach of the availability of these resources, grow the community, is something that we want to do. So if you would like to help with that, we would love to have you. Please feel free to take photo or video as we go. If you'd like, share it out to your social network. Let people know that you are learning with Power to Fly, that you are, getting free resources, upskilling, making choices for your career. We would love to repost, retweet, reshare anything that you tag us in. You can also use our hashtag Power to Fly, and we would love to see the love from you all. Again, no pressure there, just anything we can do to spread availability and awareness of these resources, something we want to do. So I definitely recommend you check us out on those channels. We share all kinds of great content. There's a lot of stuff to be seen there: blog posts, interviews with recruiters, job descriptions, hot new jobs that have just been posted. So absolutely feel free to take advantage of that. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about before I introduce you to today's speaker so our speaker today is here on behalf of Condé Nast. Now, they have been great partners with Power to Fly, and I'm going to share with you a link in the chat right now This is a link to Condé Nast company page on powerfly.com. Now, what you need to know about this is that's what this page is that you're looking at. That's where the link is going to take you. And their company page on powerfly.com is where you can go to learn all kinds of information about Condé Nast. You can get information about the company, their values, see what their what their company culture is like. You can take a look at events that'll tell you, or that'll show you past events that they have partnered on with us, as well as future events that we have planned with them. And as obviously is probably the main draw for most people, you can also search and apply to their open roles right from powerfly.com. Now, if you are actively job seeking and maybe don't see anything on the jobs list with Condé Nast right now that really speaks to you, that is fine. Something I recommend that you take advantage of is the follow network. So at the top right-hand corner of every company page on powerfly.com, there is a big pink button. It says follow. If you click that, it's going to do some really great things for you, but effectively what it does is it works like your friend at Condé Nast. So it's going to tell Condé Nast that you are interested in working with them even before you fill out an application. But it's also going to allow Power to Fly to kind of shortcut some of the job seeking stuff for you. So we're going to let you know when they post new roles, and you don't have to feel like you have to keep coming back and circling and memorizing eventually the job boards because you feel like you see the same posts all the time. So absolutely take advantage of that feature. It's free. We do it on every company page. Follow and unfollow as many times as you want, as many companies as you want. It's also a really great feature if you're not actively seeking, but Condé Nast sounds like an interesting company for you. It's a really great way to keep a short list of the companies that have caught your eye. So that way, when you do go to look and see what's out there, look for your next career opportunity, you'll remember, great companies that gave you that warm fuzzy feeling that you could see yourself there. All right, so enough about Condé Nast. I'm very excited to introduce you to today's speaker. So we are joined today by Jheanell Elliott. Now, Jheanell is the New Yorker product team's most senior engineering manager, and she is focused on expanding the breadth and impact of the brand's digital presence. Now, her primary focus is to build and maintain features targeted at improving reader engagement and discovery of the New Yorker's digital offerings on the web. Now, Jheanell has a 16+ year career that spans interactive media, visual and web design, as well as computer animation. Jheanell's previous roles as a graphic and interactive designer have heavily influenced her philosophy as a software engineer and how she thinks about user experience. Jheanell is a firm believer that the most successful applications are the ones that are the simplest to use. Jheanell, welcome to the stage today. We are so happy to get to speak with you. Is there anything else about that you would like our audience members to know before we dive into questions today?
Hi everyone. I'm excited to be here and talk to you. Nothing else, just every time I hear 16+, it's just about, wow, it's several, at least one decade has passed.
Right? It's wild.
Since I've here and done this, yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Now, last but not least, before we dive into questions, the last thing we're going to talk about is some of the things that you can expect to take away from today's session. So these are all subjects or topics we identified from conversations with Jheanell, as well as by looking at the questions you all submitted. But things to know is that if you took time out of your day to be here with us for the live stream, for the recording, we want to make it worth your while. We want to reward you for that. So if you are here with us live, you get the chance to drive today's conversation. If Jheanell is mentioning terms or concepts that you've never heard of or you want to dive in deeper on, let me know in the group chat, or obviously always the option to DM me. No worries there. I won't, no calling people out or anything. You're more than welcome to submit questions or comments any way you like. Maybe we're going over one of your questions and you'd like to add some context or details. Maybe you submitted a question and you're not sure if we're going to get to it. Send them into the group chat, y'all. I want to make sure we get you the answers you came here for, but I can't do that if I don't know the questions you want to ask. So just a couple of things that we're going to talk about. We're going to discuss how you can launch into engineering, especially if you're coming from a non-traditional background. We're going to discuss some of the hard and soft skills that you would need to be successful in that role. We're also going to touch on why problem solving is so important and how it can really make you stand out within that industry. And then we're also going to discuss what hiring managers are looking for in potential candidates, especially those from non-traditional backgrounds. So Jheanell, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and we will highlight. There we go. So we're going to start off here with a question that was honestly asked a lot. We got this in a lot of different formats. A lot of people wanted to know about what you recommend as a non-conventional way of breaking into engineering and what that first step looks like. So for you, I'm assuming that you have a non-traditional background. Apologies if that's incorrect. But what did this transition look like for you?
Oh, for me. So as far as kind of like my background, and I assume that when the questioner is asking like non-traditional, they're thinking about like comp sci, being in computer science or via college or even like boot camp. My background is actually computer animation, right? So it's about like illustrations, but I say the best vehicles for like segueing into software development, it really comes down to a personal project, a freelance job, or even joining an open source project that interests you. There's nothing more kind of like significant to get you to start learning about the environment that you're building something in than just to do it. Just to say this thing is interesting, or you know what, maybe I don't like the way how this app is done, right? So I want to tackle a way of like how I could do it better, or like maybe this website is just really ugly. How could I build something better and present the information better? So it's more of just like finding a project and just doing it. Best way to get into it.
I like that. Okay. Now let's say if you are outside of the industry, do you think that there are certain roles that are best to look at if you're looking for kind of entry level stuff? Apologies, I don't have a ton of technical expertise despite sitting in on a lot of these conversations. I'm always trying to learn, y'all. But apologies if what I'm asking is like kind of word salad. But yeah, like, do you think there are more common, roles or fields that people do transition into, especially if they have, professionally been entirely outside of tech?
So I think the easiest kind of point of entry currently in this day and age is like web software development, right? Engineering itself is a large spectrum of things, right? You have web, you have application, you have data, you have all sorts of stuff. But the thing that I think the area that most people nowadays kind of like enter into is web, because the web is easy. It's mostly free. But I'm hoping I'm continuing to remember like the core of what you're asking me. But I think it's this really kind of like, web development.
Yeah.
Web is easy. Web is
Yeah.
easy. Web is free.
Yeah, I like that. Well, and that's a really good pointer, right? Because there's a lot of times or a lot of fields that people want to look into or want to start kind of digging their teeth into, and it can be very cost prohibitive depending on what you're looking at. And there's a lot of places willing to take your money, but that say like that they want to train you, they want to whatever. And it's very easy, even with all the research in the world, to kind of start throwing good money after bad. So yeah, I thank you for specifying that it's much more accessible. I think that is hugely important for people.
It is, it's like it really comes down to the way how a person learns, right? Because like I mentioned, there are so many things, so many blog items, so many like articles, YouTube videos, everything. And it can feel overwhelming at times, right? It's just kind of like, oh my God, there's like so much of everything, maybe I need to pay for, somebody to kind of like codify it into something digestible, right? So it comes down to how you learn yourself, right? But just understand that, if it is something, if you're not able to kind of have that opportunity to like spend the money to maybe go to a boot camp or do this, there is a way, there is a will, there is a way type of situation. So resources are bountiful.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about if you are from a non-traditional background and you are in the application or interview process. How do you think is a way that candidates from that non-traditional background can stand out? I know a lot of people had questions like kind of secondary around this. So let's talk about standing out from the pack first. Do you think there are things people can do to really set themselves apart, or do you think it's kind of going to be one of those things where everybody is looking for that thing to set them apart?
So for me, especially when like you're coming from you're coming from a non kind of like tech background, first and foremost, always have a portfolio project ready to show. I cannot tell you the amount of times I have received resumes where the first thing that kind of goes through my head is that, oh, I would love to see what this individual has kind of like put together. So always have a project at the ready for a hiring manager or an interviewer to kind of like take a look at your code. As far as kind of like how to make yourself stand out with that project, have that project reflect what you're passionate about, right? If you were a cook, or if you were a sound engineer, even like a painter, right? Perhaps the project that you've built to show off your skills is reflective of that particular area, right? And it will always be really interesting to the interviewer for you to kind of like bring this application that is something from like the arts or something just really, really out there, and have you explain it to them, like walk through the reasons why you built this, why you felt the need to kind of like, manifest this thing, and answer, have answers for the whys. Why did you build this as you walk through the how you built it?
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so let's talk about when it comes to kind of talking about your background to hiring managers. A lot of the questions were framed around this idea of having to convince a hiring manager to invest in someone when other candidates might have more direct experience. What do you think when it comes to these kinds of things? Like, is it a situation where you have to convince the hiring manager? What's your experience been like?
So my experience is that the first thing I want to say, you need to bring your passion, right? No one's ever going to be, you're always selling yourself during an interview. So in order to kind of like get that hiring manager to be just as invested as your story, kind of like have the reason of why, right? If it's open up and it's like, oh, you used to be a chef, what interested you in being a software engineer, right? Share that story. We do want to hear it. If you think that, oh, I've just come in to, write code, talk about, what for loop is, whatever. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your story of why you wanted to jump into this career. That is the easiest way to kind of get a hiring manager to be invested in you.
I like that. I think it's a good, kind of a good tip for people. Just super random off the cuff, because I was thinking about a chat I hosted yesterday. We were talking about video pitches and sending out video pitches to hiring managers and recruiters, with this idea of maybe it's part of your application, but it might also just be because you're trying to network, right? You're trying to make the connections that might help get you jobs, either in the near future or down the road. Do you have any experience with this? Have you seen this come into vogue within the industry at all? I'm always curious to see if like tech fields gravitate towards this kind of stuff sooner, or if it's something that personally I would expect to see it more from the creative side and then kind of like trickle down. But have you seen this happen at all?
I have not seen that happen too much, specifically within tech. No, but that would be interesting. It would be surprising, but but I haven't seen it done.
It struck me as very interesting. I'm really kind of curious to see where it goes from here, because it kind of like, I remember back in the dark ages when you still had to walk your resume into physical offices.
Yeah.
That like the next big thing was formatting, right? And that was going to be like the make or break. And some places you had to do super formal, and others it was like, no, if you like get creative and do something that's going to like stand out and whatever. So I'm sorry, just kind of an off the cuff question for me here. All right, let's talk about what kinds of backgrounds work best or have maybe the easiest transition into the engineering field. One of the people who had written in also had a follow-up question wanting to know if your graphic design skills, like if those experiences were especially translatable. So let's go from your experience and then we'll kind of expand from there. Was
So
graphic design, really helpful for you?
so I think the first thing that I want to kind of like add to that is, you know, any any background is translatable. You just need to find your in, right? So
Yeah.
first and foremost, I want to say that. So as far as kind of like how graphic design kind of like made like helped me segue into engineering, it was more of like a means to an end. I got into engineering as a means to an end, as
Okay.
far as the graphic design. So it I saw software engineering, web, and also web design is just like a different medium, right? To
Okay.
translate the design that I created, right? So a lot of the times graphic design it's seen as being very static, not very
Mhm.
interactive, right? And so at least with the graphic design, um, instead of thinking of like, oh, this is going to be printed or oh, this is just going to sit on a screen, now you have to start thinking about interactivity, right? Which leads you to kind of go down other little rabbit holes of kind of like, you'll quickly learn that, oh, this thing that this beautiful kind of like comp that I put together is just going to look so awesome in Chrome. And then you open it up in Firefox and you're just like, oh, that absolutely did not look like how I thought it would. Which then brings you to kind of like delve into, solving a problem of like, okay, well, why does this look different? Right? And why does this padding look different? Or, and then you learn about, oh, like types, fonts are rendered differently on different machines. The type of, your font that looks nice and without any like anti-aliasing on your Mac is going to look completely different on PC, right? It's just each time when you come in with an initial assumption, and then you're looking at it in this medium, right?
Yeah.
And then you move into you're like, oh, I want to make sure this looks good on every screen. Then you realize there are more and more problems that need to be solved.
Got it. Makes sense.
Mhm.
All right. Could you this is something that, like, so I love what you said about how there are, kind of every skill, like there are no industries that you cannot have translatable skills.
Mm.
Could you share a couple examples of those, like things that might not have seemed off the at the surface to be translatable? Because I find that this is something that really helps people is like the examples, right? Like
Mhm.
I majored in art history in college because I wanted to go to law school, and so writing intensive was the thing you needed. So it didn't really matter if you were an English major or a history major as long as you had a writing intensive major. So
Mhm.
like that would be like kind of the through line that a lot of people I don't like. I can tell you from experience, telling people you're going to law school from an art history degree gets a lot of questions and stares. So like all of this to say, like, are there some things that you've seen people say are translatable that you never would have thought of that are like super, super great? What have you seen that really stands out?
I have seen people who I've had applicants that have had backgrounds in menswear, be, a very competent, front end engineer. I have worked with people who used to be writers, right? And who have become competent software engineers, right? I have seen people who were the sound engineer, the guy who holds the boom on a set, who have been competent engineers. So, and each of the through lines of those, when asked is kind of like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, why did you want to do build software? You're just kind of like, they're like, oh, there's a there's the there's a there's a problem that is solved. They're like, oh, I thought that this was cool. I wanted to build an app. I wanted to, bring my designs from being on the paper to being something interactive that people can use. So it's, I mean, there's so many, so many backgrounds that I've come across and seen, and it's not just front end, right? Because some people might think it's like, oh, it's very easy to come to front end. There are some people in my own personal life, I went to art college. I have friends who, graduated with an illustration degree, fine arts degree, that they're currently a data forensic analyst. Yeah.
Ooh, I
So
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
All right. Well, and keep in mind, y'all, you're coming with, you're coming from a non-traditional background. You get
Mm,
to think of it as a culture add. Like, what do you bring to the table that no one else is going to bring because they don't come from your background?
mm.
All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
All right. So let's kind of in the same vein, let's talk about some of the soft skills that'll help you
Mm.
advance in engineering. Can you share with us what some of those soft skills might be?
Sure, sure, sure. So, kind of like the first thing on that list is about communication, right? Very important. You need to be able to articulate your thought processes, right? So, it's not just about, yeah, I'm going to be doing this thing. Like, you need to tell me why you're going to do that thing, right? It is more important for me to know how you got to that rather than what you're doing, right? Then, secondly, it's about information gathering, right? Your ability to kind of ask clarifying questions. If I'm in an interview with you and I present you a question, I, give you a problem. If I'm not hearing a follow-up question, that's kind of like a ding for me, right? That means you've just ingested it. There's no one who just knows right off the bat what it is that you're asking me, that
Yeah.
I'm asking you, right? Then I would say third would be the ability to document the things that you learn. I cannot tell you, it's kind of like the unicorn in the forest in legend. That is documentation, the ability to do good documentation. It's and kind of like breaking down that kind of skill set a little bit more. It's about like being able to capture and surface relevant information. I always say, think about your future self. You need to be kind to your future self. That is what
Ooh.
documentation is meant to be. I think like fourthly would be collaboration. I think one of the biggest myths about tech that people come in about tech is that we're all just like working like with like dozens of screens, like little matrix green things, and we're all by ourselves in like a dark room or something like that. In a
Wait, that's
professional
not how that
sense,
works?
no, ma'am. Most of the time in a professional environment, you will be working with more than one person. The code that you build will more than likely not be the code that you come back to a couple of months down the line. So you need to be highly collaborative. You need to know how to work in environment and kind of like take yourself out of it, as far as kind of like, don't get upset if your things change, but also kind of like being aware that, oh, this thing changed. I need to be paying attention to why was it changed and how I can add on to that in an efficient
Yeah.
way. And I think the last point I would say, being able to admit when you don't know anything,
Mm.
most important skill, right? It is far worse for you to act like you know something when you don't than to just say, you know what, that's not something that I was able to look into, or I'm not familiar with that. More likely than not, somebody will be able to tell when you don't know something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very, very good point. Before we walk on past this subject, do
Mm,
you think that having soft skills, and honestly, like I love how you highlight that like these can come from anywhere.
mm,
I've had a past guest refer to them as survival skills because they're a thing that helps you be a person in the world. Like
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
soft skills seems very pejorative, but like,
Mm.
do you think when it comes to these soft skills or these survival skills, do you think that they can make up for a lack of engineering related experience? Like, do you think it's like a balancing act? And if you are, kind of the end all be all of amazing transferable skills, you can overcome the fact that you might not have the hands-on experience?
They very much help, right? A lot of the times, any hiring manager, right? If a candidate shows some like really standout soft skills, when that interviewer and then a hiring manager is sitting there and thinking about, here is a candidate that maybe has years and years of experience in this tech field, but they don't know how to talk or be collaborative, right? But here is a candidate that might not have as much experience, but they are articulate, they are collaborative, that they will ask questions, then you're sitting here weighing the question of who is teachable and who isn't. That is what it comes down to. Who is teachable and who is not. Most recent interview that I've had in the past couple of years with a candidate was, we had sent out a tech test, and the thing that stood out to me the most about this candidate was their README file. It was beautiful. It was clear. It was, I went into this thing and I was just like, oh my God, this organization of this. Mwah. It was like that chef kiss emoji. Mwah, every day. Anybody who knew that I was in that interview knew I was gushing over this candidate's at work.
Love it. All right. Okay. So we've got 30 minutes left in the session. So if y'all have questions, please feel free to send them in. You can send them in the Zoom group chat. You can also DM them to me if you'd like to keep yourself anonymous. No worries either way. If you have, comments for us, do you agree with what we're talking about? Have you experienced something different? Please let us know. I want to know, we've got the time here. We're spending it together. I want to know how y'all are feeling about this session. All right, let's talk about why problem solving is such a critical skill, when it comes to the tech industry. What do you think makes that problem solving such a valuable asset to have?
So I would encourage people to kind of think of the core of what engineering is, right? Because it's not just kind of like software engineering. Engineering in itself, the nature of it is that you are coming up with a solution to a presented problem, right? And then that in itself is really kind of like the answer to why problem solving is so important within tech, right? You will always be presented with a scenario, a challenge, a want, a desire, whether it be product, whether it be kind of like, you've gathered all this data, how you're going to store it. You have to think and solve for how to appropriately get the correct end result, right? How do I want this site to look? How do I ensure this is ADA compliant? How do I make sure that we have security? That this data that we have gathered from users on our site is used appropriately and safely, right? You are always solving for something. You are presented with something, and you're always going to be solving for it.
Like it. Okay. Now, if you are trying to showcase this ability during the interview phase, what do you think are some good ways to do this? I think that depending on how thorough the interviewer is, sometimes you're asked about things like this, but sometimes you're not. So if you're not, what do you think are some good ways to highlight this for an interviewer?
All right. So I would encourage everyone to just like take themselves way back to high school, right? When you get that book report and you think of the first questions is like, okay, what was this about? Right. So I bring this to say is kind of like have a project, a past project that you've worked on, whether it be something that you did on a job or just something like a personal project for yourself, and present why you did it, right? What you were trying to achieve with it, right? The end result that you wanted, the things that you learned while you did it, the problems that you encountered while doing it, and how you solved for those problems, right? That is how I would recommend to kind of like bring that to an interviewer, and then definitely stand out that way.
All right. I'm seeing a bunch of questions come in the chat, so thank you everybody that's submitting them. I'm grabbing everything that I see, so we're going to try and get to as many as possible. One of the first ones we got, this person had asked, what would the hard skills be to hard skill English, Megan? It's the only language I speak. Come on, we'll get it together. What are the necessary hard skills that you will need for this transition other than actual programming languages? So like, let's go super building blocks. Like, what can you not try and do this without? Like, have to have been in the same room as a computer at some point.
Yes. I would probably want to kind of like dig in further. It depends on the kind of like which part of the industry that you're trying to come into. Because what I can tell you that you need as a hard skill for a web engineer could be completely different than what you
Yeah.
need as a data engineer, or even somebody who's into machine learning, right?
Okay.
So it kind of like it, it definitely depends. But what I could say is that the first thing that if you're saying that, you know what, okay, I want to dig into this, I want to dig into this kind of like realm or this section of engineering, identify what is the standard, what are the standard piece of technologies that are currently being used within that field, right? And learning those standards, right? I always say try to learn at least 2 languages, right? They can be relatable, right? Um, then it's kind of comes down to kind of like the core processes, right? Is it here like, with application development, right? We're talking about, are you going to be mainly an iOS developer, right? You're going to
Yeah.
at least need to make sure that you have like a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone, right? Have access to Xcode, what is it that what are kind of like tool sets, what kind of like languages, like if you're going to be an Android developer, right? Get in with that, Android SDK. Or even if you're like, you know what, no, I want to get in on these kind of like virtual assistants, and I want to start developing for like, Alexa or, Google Home, right? What are the SDKs for those? And what are the standards for those? So there's so many avenues. I would say just make sure to kind of like find out what are industry standards pieces of languages, industry standards of pieces of knowledge that you need to know for the area that you intend to dive into.
Great. Thank you.
Mm.
Okay, we're going to try and get through a couple more of these. One person had asked, how many projects are enough for a beginner's portfolio?
I would say 2 to 3 is enough for a beginner's portfolio.
Okay, 2 to 3 sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, one more that we got written in, and then we're going to keep going. So if you've got questions, please feel free to send them in, y'all. This person had said, I come from an illustration and visual communication design background, and I'm very interested in web development. Where would you consider to be a good place to start? There's so many references, or there's so many resources available online. So are there any that you recommend?
So one of my favorite places, and even to like I love Mozilla's documentation, right? So if I think uh, what is it, MDM? So MDN is kind of like the best place for referential kind of information, to kind of like just pop in, and as far as with resources. I also like to, I'm kind of like digging into kind of like some of the places that I myself still keep in my own back pocket from an illustration point of view. There are places like SitePoint is a really good place as well. There is there used to be this magazine, like Net Magazine was a big web design centric kind of like magazine. They've segued into being purely digital. They're by Creative Blog. So that's a good resource from like a graphic and graphic point of view. And what I used to do when I was actively, and even when I do still, when I still kind of like design in my free time, I always like to go to the AAA awards, the AW awards, which it's kind of like a showcase of all these websites and places, applications that kind of like have won awards dealing with like in a particular category. And I usually like to go to those for inspiration. And you'll go on a site and see that they've done something like really kind of like out there, like, what have they done with kind of like D3 or WebGL, or even just kind of like the way how they've done their menu. I've seen some really amazing things. So those are kind of like from an illustration and graphic point of view for web design, those are some things that I would recommend.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for these, sharing this information with us. Okay, let's talk about some of the most high, like in demand hard skills these days. If you are looking to learn something and you want to be cutting edge, you want to be the next great thing that people are going to be looking for, what are you seeing, or what do you think that might be coming down the pike in terms of necessary or needed within the industry?
Okay, so I'm going to be speaking specifically from kind of like a web purview. So definitely kind of like JavaScript, specifically with React and other kind of like similar view model libraries. Like React is really, really big. It's about kind of like interactivity. There are a lot of sites. Definitely Node.js, get familiar with that. The next big thing is kind of like as a back end language is Golang is becoming pretty popular. Being familiar with kind of cloud computing services similar to like Google Cloud Platform, AWS, or Azure. Those are some good services to be familiar with. And there's also kind of like GraphQL, right? That's pretty popular. And there are, I think in web in general, like knowing some type of kind of like database structure, like most recent is kind of like no SQL type of databases, but still it would be still pretty good to kind of make yourself familiar with tabular and relational databases as well. So there's from like a web perspective, and I think even from like caching or CDN, which is like content delivery networks, right? Big popular one from like a professional point of view is it's Fastly, but a lot more people might be familiar with Cloudflare. Cloudflare is an easier kind of like in. Then there is kind of like if you want to like delve in a little bit more, kind of like if you're learning for data and dashboards, then definitely Datadog. Getting familiar with that. There's a bunch. There's a bunch. I can only name like a few.
Yeah. All right. Okay. What do you think that somebody with no engineering experience can do today to start getting up to speed on coding? What do you think should be the first thing that you do?
First thing that you need to do is answer the question for yourself, why do you want to code? Because that answer will take you through the times when you were sitting there 3 a.m. in the morning, wondering why your code is not working. This thing that you've kind of like, it worked 3 minutes ago, and then you changed one line, and then it's not, and you've been banging your head back and forth on it, only to later find out that there is a semicolon missing from your line. That answer you got to yourself will carry you through those moments. So that's the first. That's the first thing. And then just kind of like come up with think of like a simple project that you want. I have a friend of mine who she really loves Pokemon, and she built a Pokedex in Svelte.
Love that.
Svelte, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Abby is also in the chat sharing that Udemy is a great tutorial resource for newbies. Absolutely take advantage of any free learning opportunities. There's a ton of things you can learn for free thanks to the internet. But absolutely, exercise or try and figure out what you can do for free before you start throwing money at it, because that's going to lead us into the next question. A lot of people wanted to know if employers prefer certain programs or certifications over others. Now, one of the things we're starting to talk about more and more is that there's certifications for a lot of stuff, and that's great. But that some of them might carry weight and some of them might not. So what have you seen when it comes to any kind of preference over, for or against certain certifications or classes or boot camps?
So as far as like certification goes, the only pieces of technology that I have seen where like certifications kind of like have really, really mattered is maybe something if you had like an AWS certification, right? AWS is a very complicated system. And it's something that even when you get the certification, you have to keep getting certified.
Yeah.
I think if you're kind of like on the back end DevOps type of or DevSpecs type of like area, like AWS certification will really, really help you. Or even kind of like getting certified in like Google, cloud platform, like those kind of like these cloud services. I think those are the areas where certifications will be most helpful to you. But truth be told, like outside of that, like a hiring manager is really looking for like experience. Experience is the most important versus a certification.
Okay. All right. All right. A lot of people had questions about boot camps, right? Like this person had written in wanting to know if it's true that employers look down on boot camp grads. If so, what can you emphasize on interviews or resumes that would make employers still consider you? Has this been your experience when it comes to, kind of industry attitudes toward boot camps?
I I kind of want to reject a little bit the notion that like boot camp grads are like looked down upon, right? I think I would want to reframe that a little bit to kind of say to understand like the current market in the tech field is very saturated, right? So as a grad of any type, right? You have to think about what is it that makes you kind of like stand out. I think most of maybe um, concern that you might see from some hiring managers and in the case of like boot camps is that with a boot camp and even similarly kind of like a college class, you're taught just how to be able to get off the ground running and do like build a React application, right?
Mhm.
You're taught how to like and this is just one example. So you're taught how to build an application, but you're not taught the whys, right? You're not taught foundational information. It is up to you to kind of go find out, like, foundationally, like React is a great entry point into, learning how to build things within JavaScript. But you also have to understand that like React is not JavaScript. There is an entirely like, a whole new infrastructure, language infrastructure that is happening under React that it's keeping. A lot of these frameworks are an abstraction from core things, right? So like, Sass and styled components and all these, they make the dev experience very easy, right? It's just kind of get something up and running, right? But they also keep you from really kind of understanding, like, oh, you dispatched an event. Did you like, you're like, oh my God, there's an event cycle that's being missing, or you having like a kind of race conditions, right?
Yeah.
These frameworks hide this stuff from you, right? And so as a hiring manager, you can, what they want to see from you is that, yeah, you know how to use this framework, but do you know the language itself? Do you know it at its core? So when you don't have this thing, that if I ask you a question and say, hey, we have this problem, the site is broken, you can answer like, oh, fundamentally, like, oh, this is what's happening underneath it.
Yeah. Ooh, okay, great. All right. We had a couple more questions come in. So again, we're going to try and get to as many as we can. Let's see. Oh, okay. This person had written in, I love this question too, by the way. They said, I'm currently shadowing some engineers in my company, and I already feel intimidated by all the new concepts and languages. Do you have any tips for fighting imposter syndrome while you're making this transition?
Yes. I would say to this person, I need you to tell yourself you deserve to be there, first and foremost, right? Jargon can be intimidating and hard and scary. Any technical based field, not just tech, could be in writing and anything, even in design, they can be scary, right? So it's always great to say, if you're like, you know what, I don't know this. Maybe I don't need to be here. And you're like, no, everyone had to start from somewhere. Not a single person who is there, who is saying and doing all these things, they started from somewhere. And just as they are there and they deserve to be there, so do you. And if you need to learn something, ask.
Yeah. Yeah, it keeps going back to that, being curious and being willing to ask questions and admit when you don't know things.
Absolutely.
One of the hardest lessons not hardest, I should say, like one of the big lessons I learned early on was like, if you don't understand, just ask. Tell them you don't know.
100%.
It's okay. And for me, like, I'm not good at just saying I don't know. So my follow-up is usually, I don't know, but I can find out.
Yes. Right.
Show
It
that
is not
willingness to go do the work.
absolutely, because then I think a lot of people get a little scared of saying like I don't know because it's like a challenge of their intelligence. It
Mhm.
shows more. It is more of like it speaks more to your intelligence that you can seek the answer and that you want the answer rather than sitting there in kind of in ignorance. Don't
Yeah.
steep in ignorance. It's not a good tea. No.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Mhm.
And thank you so much. I just want to hold space for what Jheanell had said. Like, you deserve to be there. That's excellent. And it's okay to feel very weird trying to tell yourself that. Like, it, for me, self-affirmations always feel very bizarre and like performing or something. I don't know. It just feels weird. It is totally fine to do that for yourself. For me, my big thing and thing I always go back to is like, especially if I'm feeling like, well, I don't belong here, or I'm not as good as everybody else on the team, or I'm not pulling my weight. Who told you that? Is it your brain? Because mine lies to me. Probably yours does too. But like,
Mhm.
did someone tell you that, or are you letting your brain convince you that that's reality?
Absolutely.
If you're not doing a good job and people around you care, they will tell you you're not doing a good job. So, don't invite that stuff onto yourself, and make your life any harder than it has to be. All right. Big question. This person wanted to know, what advice would you have liked to receive when you were making this transition?
The advice that I wish that I had received earlier on was that I don't need to know everything. Earlier in my career, it was like I needed to know all the things. I need to do all the things. I needed to be the jack of all the trades and maybe be the master of them as well, which is
Mhm.
impossible. Um, I think if I had had that, I would have showed a lot more kindness to myself. I would have been able to set boundaries a little better in my professional in my professional life and find a little bit more like joy from the work that I did if I'd have gotten that advice.
Yeah.
You don't
Do
need
you
to know
think it
everything. You just need to be good at what you do know.
do you think it was is that something that you were able to kind of wrap your mind around, like, slowly over the course of your career, or did you have a moment where you were like, oh yeah, I don't have to know all of this?
I think as you move further in your career, I, I think about this like this meme that I saw once, right? And it's kind of like a developer at the beginning of their career where like they're in a dark room, they have a hoodie, there's many monitors, the matrix is going on. That's like a developer at the beginning of the career. And then a senior developer is just out like on a farmland. Like that is like the story of like moving from junior to senior. You learn these things as you move forward,
Yeah.
right? You learn these things that you just kind of like you get kind of like validation from the people around you. You get to see other people's experiences because we are human beings. We don't flourish in vacuums, right?
Yeah.
And then can sometimes just having the right people kind of like tell you, and it's like, no, slow down, you know, take a
Yeah.
moment.
Like that. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. We have a little under 5 minutes left, so I want to take some time here to kind of bring it back to Condé Nast a little bit, because
Mm.
obviously Jheanell is here on behalf of them today. I want to talk a little bit. What you're seeing are some questions that we had asked Jheanell prior to today's session. So I want to kind of dive in on some of these your answers here. You described the company culture at Condé Nast as passionate. Could you expand on that for us?
So I would say passionate in that, one of the things that I love about working here at this company is that even like, having exposure outside of like the tech tech, you see people who love what they do. You can see it reflected in the way how they carry themselves, the way how they do their work, the way how when you sit there and talk to them in the hallway, you can get like, I just had someone who was probably in the fashion that said, I love your shirt. And I was like, well, thank you. And we can have a discussion about it. Even from the tech perspective, I have worked at a lot of places, right, within tech. And I would say like Condé and the people that I have met here at Condé who, who either here or still or are no longer here have just been the greatest people that are like, they love what they do, even when they hate it, and they are always willing to kind of help and share information. That's what I appreciate about working here.
I love that. It's one of those things that is invaluable once you find it in a workplace. Like it's palpable, right? You can feel it. You can feel the difference when somebody really enjoys what they do, even if they're having a rough day.
Yeah.
So I like it. All right. Your favorite part about working at Condé Nast. The people is overwhelmingly the most popular answer we get. And it's no wonder why, honestly. Like so many of us truly spend more time with our work colleagues than we do with our families or our friends or our partners. So what do you think what do you think is the reason the people are the reason you stay? Is there something special that stands out in your mind?
Oh, yeah. So I think the reason why the people is the answer for me is because I work with a lot of people with diverse backgrounds, with non-traditional backgrounds, with traditional backgrounds, and even kind of like extended interests, right? And I just really love like the collaborative and inclusiveness of it. Like I can't even emphasize it enough. Like I know that there are several of my coworkers here out, supporting me on this chat. So hi everyone, which like speaks to itself of why the people stand out to me.
Yeah, I like that. All right. What are your top tips for someone who's interviewing? Are these Condé Nast specific? Or do you think they are applicable no matter where you're interviewing? Tell us about this.
I think these tips are applicable to anywhere that you go. Take your time, right? If you rush through, what you're going to do is you're just going to make yourself nervous. You're going to forget about anything that you said. So take your time. An interview is just as much about you interviewing the people, interviewing the job, as they are interviewing you.
Yes.
Verbalize your thought process, right? Sitting in silence does not help you. It also works. Verbalizing your thought process also helps kind of like reorient you in things in what you plan to say, right? And also do not be afraid to ask clarifying questions. It goes back to what I had mentioned kind of like at the top of the hour. Things that stand out to me is if I'm in an interview and I'm asking you a question, and if I don't get a follow-up from you asking me to clarify the thing that I said, right? That's a flag to me. Or flag to any interviewer.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. We are about at the end of time today. So I just wanted to take a second here to say a huge thank you to Jheanell. It has been absolutely wonderful to get to sit and learn from you and, share the last hour with you. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been truly wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And I also want to say a big thank you to our audience. Thank you so much to all our community members for joining us today, especially everybody who's chiming in and joining us on YouTube. Hi, everybody on the live stream. So happy to have seen you all today. If you are one of our returning Power to Fly, frequent flyers, thank you so much for showing up, y'all. I really love seeing the returning faces, familiar names. It is really something that kind of charges me up. Have a good feeling every time I see familiar names and faces pop up in chats. But if this was your first Power to Fly event, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that we will get to see you again soon. And we have some great programming coming up for you the rest of today. I've got another chat starting at 3:00 about 5 simple tips for better virtual meetings. And tomorrow at 1:00 we're going to talk about common mistakes that keep you stuck as a job seeker. So if you're interested in either of those, head back to our Power to Fly. You can always sign up for our chats in advance. And if you can't make it, no worries. We will always email you the recording. So sign up, even if the time doesn't work. That way you don't miss out on great content. I hope that you will all have a safe, happy, healthy rest of your Thursday. And if we don't see you before tomorrow, have an excellent weekend as well. See you later, all. Bye.